please, are you with us? And can you give us a little bit of insight or thoughts on what Larry just presented?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I can. How much it fits exactly with Larry, we'll see, because I think my comment's going to be a little broader, sort of giving just the overall perspective on sort of everything that's happened from an overall corporate perspective. And obviously insurance is a huge piece of, corporations and a huge piece of business. So, but I want to start with hearkening back to something Jonathan said, which I was sort of chuckling at when he was talking about, sort of getting the marketeers and some of the financial people like in a room together. And I think he said having a death match. So there's a natural tension that exists in corporations, insurance companies, and all other companies, right, big companies, around, the sort of the bean counters, if you will, and the people who are the marketeers, et cetera. And so one thing I think you're going to see happen now is there's going to be a little bit of a power shift, right? Because all these events have canceled, events that companies have spent millions and millions of dollars on, and companies have been, quote, okay, right? They've managed to, survive without having an event. There's going to be a little bit of a power shift, right, to the bean counters of why do you need to have these events? Or if you really need to have these events, instead of spending $5 million on it, right, couldn't you do this event for $500,000, right? So there's going to be, so that natural tension is now going to shift a little bit. And so going back to the death cage match, right? One of the participants is probably going to have one of their arms tied behind their back. So I think it's something to think about. And the question is, if what I said is correct, what does that mean for us in the event management business? So one, we should be all thinking that revenue will not be the same, right? When this whole thing comes back, we're not going to get the full price. Everybody's going to have to take a haircut to some degree, right? When we reemerge. Again, the case in point that I think about is in 2008, pre-2008, when we hired speakers, et cetera, we'd pay them somewhere roughly like $15,000, $25,000. Post 2008, right, that immediately went to $5,000. Again, around that. Any particular reason why? Not really, right? Things changed, right? And so there was a price adjustment. So I think that's one thing we have to get through our heads. We also need to think about how we help the marketeers, like how we help them explain, how we help them make the business case, how we help them understand the benefits of events and what an appropriate return on investment, right? Not just show up and say, yes, we can do an event. We're going to actually have to help them explain to the people who are going to question them as to why we should have events. And I think that gets us to have to be more transparent about our costs, what they are, when we incur them. I think we had a discussion at one of the industry meetings about how we bill. And do we start to move more toward a professional model, right, where we start to think about billing on an hourly basis and based on our real time and real effort, right? So again, a whole bunch of things there, right? But all about how do we really start to help these marketeers explain the benefits of events. The other thing is if the financial picture is going to change, is how do we think about our own costs? Again, I haven't been in this business for a long time, but one of the impressions I have is that in some cases, our costs seem to be a little heavier. And when I say heavier, I mean some of our overhead costs, et cetera. And so I think one of the things as we reemerge from this is to take a hard look at what costs, particularly hard costs, right? Particularly operating costs that are fixed, right? How much of it do we have to have? And how do we maybe start to gravitate to maybe more of a modular model, something, right, that can help us reduce our costs, as we go into this, quote, new abnormal.
It's 10 o'clock.
Okay. I think a couple other things. I'll share this. I think all corporate executives, right? There's going to be a new reality for corporate executives across the board. And I'll just say a couple things, and then you can kind of think about it, maybe figure out what this means to you and what this means to your business. But I think across the board, right? All executives, number one, the word virtual, right? It's going to mean, it means something different in the post world than it meant on January 1st, in terms of collaboration. Even something like doctors. I had a physical coming up, and my doctor's office called me and asked me if I wanted my doctor to do the physical virtually. I don't have any actual medical conditions, at least that I know of, so it was just an annual physical. I'm really not sure how you do that, right, without looking at my ear or whatever. But this is the world that we're going through, right? So somebody else talked about what's the implication for real estate, right? As we think about virtual. Now, I'm on the board. One of the boards I'm on is the board of AAA. We have about 10,000 employees. We had probably 200 of them working at home. And in a 2-week period of time, we went from 200 working at home to 10,000 working at home, right? A massive shift. And so again, as you come out of this, we're going to be pushing the CEO, the board members, to say, well, how many people really have to come in the office? And so once we get that number, there's going to be a question about, well, how much space do we actually really need now, right? Because maybe we should be changing our footprint. Back to the conversation I had about cost. A clear push, predilection to making decisions quickly, right? Because corporations can be very, very slow sometimes. This might be something that might be good for us ultimately, right? But there's going to be much more of we've got to be able to make decisions quickly,
right?
Because things happen that require quick decisions. There's going to be more thinking. This is something the insurance industry has been good at, which is thinking about risk, thinking about what are the worst case scenarios or the black swan, right? What are those things that could just come along? We're not anticipating, right, but it could come along. I think all corporate executives, no matter what business you're in, are going to be thinking about that much more. And lastly, is an overall polar of uncertainty, right? What's going to happen next? What does this mean for supply chains? What does this mean for how we thought about global, what global is, what global means on January 1st, and what do we think about global now, right? What if there's another outbreak, right? So just a cloud, an overhang, right, of uncertainty that will hang over everyone. So one last thing, so I leave at least my comments on a positive note, and that is, I think if you just listen to some of the things even I've talked about, and some of the other folks have talked about, there's a huge opportunity here for messaging. Messaging to shareholders, management, your board, customers, et cetera. Messaging about everything from what are you doing in your company to preserve cash, to what do you how are you thinking about the 2020 plan? What are the products? What impact will this have on product? What impact will this have on pricing? How do you your employees communicate to them? What have you done? Or what are you going to do around layoffs and the difference between that and furloughs, et cetera? So you can either think about this on a kind of a talking head on a 3x5 card, right? And see how that works out, right? Or you can figure out a way, and I think this is where we come into play as an event. How do you do this and deliver these messages to all these various audiences, maybe with a little bit more excitement, with a little bit more enthusiasm, with a little bit more resulting in a little bit more engagement and creativity. And at least I'd make the case that there's no one and there's no industry that's has a better opportunity and is in better shape to do this and to help companies with this than the event industry.
Well, you know what's Mhayse, thank you for that, by the way, and thank you because it's a good lead in for Gary. But I want to go back to a couple things that you said and that Larry said. All right, this whole situation that we're in right now is giving us all industry verticals around the world, everyone, an opportunity to up their game. And I will say this in my experience in events, that sometimes you go in, and because events people are passionate and they're artists and they're creative and they want to give it their all, sometimes, you know, you minimize your pricing strategy, or you don't charge enough for your services, which then in turn do not allow you, and this is for Larry and Mhayse, to then buy the proper insurance and protect yourself with contractual. I mean, if you're running a business, you're running a business. Now, there are some people online that work in corporations, and their obligation is to make sure their event companies and their vendors are properly covered. Question, just to go back, for clarification for everybody, exclusions. Is there an option, if I don't agree with an exclusion, Larry, that I can pay a premium and make it like, and protect myself? Do I have an option, or is an exclusion an exclusion?
That depends on the carrier and the type of insurance that you're dealing with.
Right.
If they know on the front side, or your broker knows on the front side what the exposure is going to be for your events, if you give them a layout, let's say I'm going to have 11 events, these are the sizes, that gives them the opportunity to make sure that they find a carrier that'll provide the coverages without the exclusions, or allow you to buy back the exclusion.
So
If
you
it's
do
a
have,
canned
I guess what I'm
program,
saying to people, yeah, there's, in other words, what I'm saying is there's always an option, but you need to work with a professional
yes,
to understand your choices, right?
yeah, it's not going to be an online program.
Right. I mean, even event cancellation. So for, you know, again, for those of us listening, just as Mhayse said, the pricing structure is going to change. My gosh, you know, when we go back, and we'll be discussing this throughout the day, how is the ballroom going to look? And that's for this afternoon, but you know, somewhere along the line, someone is going to pay for that real estate. Mhayse, we have a question for you. Is like, since many folks do not have loss of revenue coverage, what is your advice on the level of emergency savings a given business should have on hand in relation to months of operating expense?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, based on what I've seen so far, the industry seems to be a little bit light in that. Again, that's a sort of a broad statement because you all have, you know, your own different businesses. But, you know, we try to put away 2% just as a, you know, no matter what, we just continue to try to put that away for that rainy day fund. But, you know, it's difficult to give a carte blanche answer because it depends, right? I mean, it depends on what your overhead is. Again, as I said earlier,
right,
how much of it is fixed, right? How much of it can you actually get rid of? You know, how much liquidity do you have in your business? Do you actually have cash? Do you have lines of credit? There's a lot of things you have to look at. I'll just answer this question by saying you really need to evaluate it for yourself. But just like you think about this on your personal level, right, there needs to be a rainy day fund. And certainly, again, if you think about what's the impact of an event like this, it really brings that home to, right, we really need to make sure we have a cushion, right, that in case something like this happens. A lot of other industries like banking, insurance, it's mandated, right, by law. This is what the capital requirements will be. We have a pretty fairly unregulated business, so I think we got to really look at that and make those decisions on our own.
Yeah, exactly. So Larry, what would you say with the couple of minutes we have left, and Mhayse, I'll ask you this too, you're giving advice to the event community on a corporate level. So I'm an internal planner, I'm a marketer, I have my own company, or I'm an independent, right? Regardless of that, when you're planning an event and producing an event, what are the, say, 3, I must have this in my insurance clause types of protection? Or my insurance contract.
Your own insurance
Pardon me?
coverage, besides your own insurance
Yeah.
coverage would be number
Besides
1.
my own, yeah, general and what would I have besides general and professional liability before I even start to talk to a client about producing or planning an event for them?
Be the same that I had on the PowerPoint. You want the general liability, professional liability, potentially the contents coverage or inland marine coverage for any property you would have. Your event that you're going to put on, every subcontractor, everybody that's listed under that event from A to Z should be naming you as additional insured, so you have defense coverage if they screw up. Not your fault, something they do.
So that's a good point, because we actually had, not to interrupt, we had a comment on that. The COI, right? Your certificate of insurance. I know when I had my company, I named all of my assigns on it, and then I was named on theirs in return.
Right.
Is that right? Yeah,
Yep.
because someone was asking that. So make sure it's a reciprocity, that everyone's policy is protecting. Mhayse, would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. And I just add one thing that's non-technical, which is in the future, just don't go do the event, right? Somebody says, I got an event, I want to do it in Vegas on June 1st, right? Or whatever it is, just don't go plop in and just do the event, because we all can do that. Make sure you spend some time thinking of helping them think about what, even though they may have come up with the idea of having an event, push on, why are they having the event? What are the benefits they're going to expect from that event, and sort of enhance that. And if you can do something on the back end to go back and say, there may be a way of looking at this, measuring this, et cetera, and looking at the benefits of it, you're going to end up in a better place with that client, because they're realizing, you're much more of a business person, and you're really helping them think about, because there's real benefits to doing these events. And if we just go through the event, we just don't want to leave that on the table. So that'd be my party.
Yes, we are an intrinsic part of communication, and with this situation that we're in, some of you heard me say this before, there is no doubt in my mind that events will be back, and we will be leading the pack, because advertising needs us and PR needs us. So think about your business, your business model moving forward. And I strongly say this, there's so much to learn about insurance, Larry. Thank you for sharing that, because I know I learned the hard way when I had a 60-inch screen break, that there's insurance for everything. We have to think about, and Mhayse, just as you said, we're in business. So when you go into a client, if they don't respect what our business costs are, then maybe they're not the right client, or they don't understand. John?
Dianne, I have a question for Mhayse.
Yes.
And this one is sort of like asking the shoemaker, does he provide shoes for his kids? But what do insurance companies do relative to their incentive programs, their sales programs, et cetera, that they're finding they have to cancel now? How do you handle that? Do you buy insurance? Do you have insurance? How does the insurance industry sort of look at this in their own way?
You mean, so they had to cancel events that?
Yeah, let's say you have a major incentive program that's set to go to, let's say, Italy.
Yes.
And it was scheduled for April in Italy.
Correct.
How would you handle that from your standpoint as to, are you self-insuring? Are you looking at this? Do you have some provision? You mentioned reserves, and all insurance companies are obligated, obviously, to have reserves. Do you look then to your reserve, or how do you address this overall? Obviously, calling your lawyer to see what your lawyer can do for you. But from the insurance company, just like I said, the shoemaker's kids generally go without the shoes.
Yeah, no, so the whole reserving requirement, that's really about loss reserves, right? Your payments, et cetera, et cetera. So that really has nothing to do with this, right? Anything else, like something like you canceled an event, et cetera, that's all going to come out of your operating costs, right? So again, it really depends. Every company is different. Some companies might have felt like, we're going to have this event, so we don't need insurance just in case. Others might, just like, again, personally, you might go on a trip and you might buy insurance just in case something happens. It really depends. It's really a company by company thing, but all of that would be included in the company's operating costs and wouldn't have anything to do with any kind of reserving or anything like that.
Yeah. That's well, Larry, do you have a quick comment on that?
I was thinking, we've had a bunch of phone calls in 2020, and we didn't have last year, where people are asking for the business travel accident insurance if they're going international because of the health. If you have a health issue, or you're stranded, or you need an attorney, that's become really popular, especially if you have people traveling international in your company. A lot of the larger companies are getting it. Anybody going to a trade show, we found a bunch of them asking for that type of insurance because they have so many employees traveling, and workers' comp may or may not cover them. So,
and probably going to become a lot more popular.
We have one last question before we move on, and this could be General Larry or Mhayse. I'll ask you, do you see clients asking for proof of financial stability from a planning company for the future before distributing funds? You know, I mean, and really, if you're a private company, what can other people ask you for? Who wants to start? Larry, you want to start? Mhayse, quick comment.
Well, yeah, I'll go first. I think the short answer is yes, right? I mean, you've seen this movement has been taking place anyway, right? Where companies are now looking at all their vendors, all their relationships. One of the things that's really heightened this is cybersecurity, right? So anybody who has access to the company's systems, they're taking a hard look at those folks anyway. And another concern is the one I think inherent in this question, which is what's the viability, right? What if they can't deliver on the things that they say they're supposed to deliver on? So I think yes, there'll be even more of that, you know, going forward. I think the other thing I would just add is that the first time I ever had an opportunity to have an event person come into my office in one of my jobs coming up the ranks and talk about how they would think about pricing an event, et cetera. To tell you the truth, I was surprised because I hadn't really dealt with it before, but I dealt with professional services, accountants and attorneys, right, et cetera. And so the sort of core model of, hey, we're going to do a bunch of work, right? We're going to spend money. We're going to do these proposals for you, and we're going to make you happy. It's going to be great. We're not going to charge you for any of that. You don't have to pay for it. And you know, hey, look, if you pick us, you pick us. Not having any kind of hourly rate or anything. I remember thinking, boy, this is really an unusual business. I guess it must work for them because that's kind of the experience. But again, I think that is something that probably needs to change as you think about this business going forward.
Yes, like more of an agency mentality, which has only been discussed for the past 35 years or so. But thank you, Mhayse. And Mhayse, I'm also glad that you referred to that all of us getting a haircut after this, because I'm going to be first in line. The bands are getting wider.